Hey there everyone, welcome to lesson number 9. We are about to the end of our course, but before we close out, we want to learn actually how we can build a new database. So in MySQL, if you remember back in the early part of this training, these models on our home tab, we're going to create a new model. I'm going to cover in this lesson how to build a model and then have that model build us our database. We're going to allow it to create our data definition language for us, and that data definition language is going to use a create table statements. So we're going to have this new model, and we're going to go ahead and click add diagram here. And it's going to create a new EERD diagram for us. It's going to be blank now, right? Because we're building this from scratch. So here, over on our catalog tree, we can edit our schema. And the reason I'm going to edit my schema is because I don't want to have it called MyDB. We can have it called MyDB. I'm going to call it Free SQL Course, okay, for this. You guys can call it what you'd like, but I'm just going to call it Free SQL Course. And that way, when this creates, I'm going to have a database in my server called Free SQL Course. So I'm going to close that down. And you'll see over here in the catalog tree, it did just that. Now, tables, here I have none currently. And if you look on this toolbar, we roll our mouse over things, we'll see that there's a place a new table. So I'm going to click the new table and click into the drawing area, and you're going to see it's called table 1. Again, not what we want. If we right click and call edit table 1, I'm going to now give this table a name. Alright, I'm going to create a very simple ordering system. Alright, it's going to have customers, it's going to have orders, products, and order details. So I'm going to call this my customers table, right? So I'm going to call customers. I'm going to give it a column. I'm going to go with customer ID. And we're not going to really talk too detailed about database design, but we're going to give it a primary key. It's going to be not null. I'm going to use AI, which is auto increment, not to be confused with artificial intelligence. We know that's a buzzword these days. My customers are just going to have some simple information, first name, and a variable length character, 45. That's pretty long. I like 25 for first names. I don't typically think that's going to go beyond it. Not null, going to have a value. Last name, do this the same way. I like 25. Not null means it's going to be filled in. And then I like email address. Okay, so email address, or just email, as we saw in the database we worked with. And I like that to be a little bit longer because domain names can be very long. So typically 100 characters is probably safe, but who knows, some domains may be even longer, but we'll go with 100. And we're going to require every customer in our system to have that. All right, so we got a primary key, we got our fields. We can see that we just have an index on primary. We're going to add our products table next, and I build my database design in order of how things are dependent. So if I'm designing out the database, like products, they have to exist before I can order anything. Same with customers, right? So I'll edit this guy. I call it products, and I'm going to have the product ID, the primary key, product name. This can be lengthy. Not null. Quantity on hand. Some of the things I don't do when I'm building databases is I don't use spaces. I use camel casing as my naming convention, so you might notice that. Integer, because it's got to be a whole number. It's if it's entered and we don't have any quantity, we can have a default to 0. Okay, we're going to default to 0. And then let's say selling price. So everything's got to have a selling price. And then since that's a price, looking over the data types, decimal's good. And then let's say nothing's going to sell over, let's say 6 price fields, comma 2 decimal places. And that can be not null as well. Everything has to have a selling price, and it's going to sell for 0 if we don't put one in. This last column I accidentally put in. I'm going to right click and click cut because we don't want that one. And then we're going to be done with products. And now we're going to have orders. Click again. Right click, edit table, call it orders. And orders are going to have an order ID for a primary key. Not null. Integer's good. It's got to have a foreign key of a customer ID. So we have to have the data type match for the foreign key. Every order's got to have a customer. It's going to have an order date. Right? And this will be a date timestamp. So let's choose the date time field. All right. So it's going to be set there. Then we're going to have one more table. We're going to have order details because every order can have more than one item. So it's going to have order details. So let's edit the table again and order details. I'm trying to keep this database small and simple for demonstration purposes, and you guys can play around with it later on once you've created it. But order details is going to have order ID as not only a primary key but also a foreign key, so keep that in mind. It's part of the primary key. And then the product ID. So every product can be on an order at least one time. Okay. So that's got to match the data type of integer, part of the primary key, concatenated key, just like you saw in that movie company database we worked with. All right, and then we're going to have quantity. That's the number that the person ordered. So that will be an integer. And that will be not null. That has to default to at least 1. And then price paid. They're always going to have to, pay a price that might be a price different than the actual selling price. And we'll match the decimal to 6, 2. Again, make sure you match your data types and all. If you accidentally hit tab like I tend to, you get an extra field again like I did. If you click on it, right click, cut, make that pay price paid. Again, not null, and it has to have a value in there. All right, so that's our design, but we don't have our relationships yet. So before we ever build our database, we always want to have our relationships set. So over here, you'll see that there are relationship lines, one-to-one, one-to-many. In all these cases, these are going to be one-to-many non-identifying relationships. So we click the line. We're going to click on the primary key table with the line. So customer ID here on customers will connect to our orders table. And actually, sorry, I got that backwards. MySQL's a little bit backwards. You want to click on the foreign key first. So do it again. So one-to-many, I'm going to click on customer ID here and then customer ID there. And that will establish the relationship. Okay. If we want to right click and edit that relationship just to make sure it's right, we can make sure that the right fields are involved here. Okay. So double check. So one-to-many, and you'll see that the foreign key field is customer ID, the primary key field is customer ID. All right, we're going to do the same here with order ID. So here, in this case, it's going to be identifying because order details needs to exist. All right, so there, and we can right click and edit the relationship. I always edit because I always want to make sure I'm on the right fields and confirm order ID, and order ID is good. And then we have one more non-identifying. We're going to go product ID to product ID. and we will edit it, and we're going to verify it. Okay, and we're on product ID, product ID. All right. So this is what our diagram or our model would look like for this ordering system. We should save it at this point. We can hit Control S and we can save it. And this would be my ordering system DB model, or we can call it an EERD. Okay. So we save it. We want this to actually get created in our database now. And what we have here up under database is the ability to forward engineer. If we do forward engineer, this is where we can take our existing connection that we have. So we have our design, which is awesome because we have to have a database design before we build our database. And yes, we can go into the connection and build a database. We could have wrote SQL to do it. But if we have our design and let our design do it, why not just do it right here from our design tool? So we go here next, after we have our connection. Now, we have to set our options. Well, we don't want to skip creation of foreign keys or anything. We definitely want them. We don't want to choose any of these options. All the defaults should be good. Click next. We want to export MySQL table objects. Okay. So we can hit show filter, but we want them all. All right. So it knows we want them all. So all 4 are selected. 4 total objects. We have no views. We have no other objects or anything like that. So we just want our tables. And then you're going to see this create our data definition language that I talked about. Now we actually will not have to create this for this course, but you can see it. And what we're going to go over here real quick, I'll explain it to you, is it does some system settings up front. And then we create our schema if it doesn't exist. You may have a create database command if this was SQL Server, but in this case we're going to have a schema the way MySQL works. So our schema name, free SQL course, and then some database settings, the character set. Now we have each one of our tables, and you see comments, so it's nicely commented out. It's going to create the customers table. You'll see that the customer ID, the settings, an integer, not null, auto increment. The other fields, the type of data, not null, and then the primary key. Okay. And then this other does another little setting here for the engine. That's optional. We don't actually probably put that in our own SQL commands. We would typically have this statement just like that, and we'd execute it and be good to go. You'll see that it does the next table, the next table. The orders table has a foreign key, so you'll see that it's a little bit more complicated, not just a foreign key. It puts the primary key, it puts the foreign key on there as well. And then lastly, our order details, because our order details has multiple foreign keys involved. And the scripting knows that it has to create these things in order of the primary tables before the tables that have dependencies. So puts it right in a nice order for us, does a little bit of system settings at the end. We can copy that to clipboard if we wanted, or we can click next and we can actually have this run for us. And you see it forward engineered to finish successfully. We can close this. Now let's go back to our connection here in our command line. Remember way back in lesson 1, show databases. Let's see if we see our database now. And there it is, free SQL course right there at the top. So what we can do is we can use free SQL course. And then remember our other command from the very beginning, show tables. There they are, customers, order details, orders, and products. Now we have a complete empty database that we can work with. We can insert customers, we can insert products, we can insert orders and order details. We're not going to actually do any of that. You have already completed the prior tutorials. What I encourage you to do is to go back through the lessons, insert data, update data, write select statements, play around with this little bit database. It's a very small ordering system, nowhere near complete, but the basics are there. This can be your foundation for finishing up and growing on your SQL skills and taking this to the next level. I hope you've enjoyed these set of lessons. I hope you follow along. I hope you share this with others. If you have questions, want to connect in the future, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my website linked to this course as well. I hope to hear from you, and if you ever need anything in the future, please reach out, and I'll be more than happy to share whatever knowledge that I have that might be helpful. Thanks again, and one last time, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Thanks.